Good morning, everyone. I'm Pablo Andres from 7 Shift. With me today is also Catherine Lees, who's going to be working with giving our presentation today. Can you stop? And here, all right, and we are, Kat is going to be presenting the pain points of the market to readiness. Basically, she's going to be talking a lot about, some of the pains that we've seen doing assessments similar to the CRA, and for the teams that are doing CRA assessments and readiness assessments. This is all part of our CRACoWi project. If you are not aware of the CRACoWi project, we are a EU-funded project. We're a consortium with companies participating from 12 we have 12 different partners from 5 different countries. And yeah, we are really working hardly to get our CRACoWi wizard, our CRA compliance wizard, which is what CRACoWi stands for. And yeah, this is part of the dissemination efforts that we have to create awareness on the CRA. So with that, I will hand over to Catherine Lees, who will be starting with the presentation. We're going to have just a quick note on the Orga side. You have the chat open, you have Q&A. So if you have any questions in between, feel free to type them out on there, and I will, give Kat heads up to try to address those questions, or I'll address them directly in the chat. And if not, we can also have some Q&A sessions at the end. Given the format of the webinar, audio, and you only have the chat to communicate with us. And of course, this meeting is being recorded, so it will also be available afterwards in the CRACoWi website as part of the CRACademy. All right, with that, the floor is yours, Kat.
Great, thanks very much, Pablo. So as introduced, my name is Catherine Lees. I work at 7 Shift, which is Pablo's company. And the talk today is about introducing some tools which can help with pain points in CRA compliance. This is based on some experience in both compliance and security testing. And a lot of these specific CRA tools can be really helpful. So we're going to look at some pain points which I've experienced during testing, and then exactly how some of these specifically designed CRA tools can help with solving these pain points. So why does compliance matter? This is usually the big question. Customers often see this as a necessary evil, but there are definitely a lot of reasons why this is important and relevant, especially with IoT. They may be small, helpless-looking devices, but devices installed in a home are not protected by corporate firewalls or by policies or by continuous monitoring. They are just connected to a home router, and often somebody will open a port on that router so they can check their device status while they're out and about. So this is really important that these devices are secure, and one weak device can mean a foothold into an entire home network. On top of that, if you have billions of connected devices, this means that in the whole you've got a huge attack surface if a vulnerability is present on all of them. And so this is why the CRA exists. It makes security a condition of selling, just like the CE mark is already currently doing that for safety. So with the CRA, a lot of devices are going to be in the self-assessment phase, which means they'll do their self-assessment and they'll put it into a drawer and continue on. But it's really important that these self-assessments are correct, because if market surveillance does want to see it, there are really big fines if these requirements are not met. So it makes a lot of sense to use the CRA specific tools to make sure that your documentation is in order. So while self-assessment seems like the easy path out in the CRA, it could come to bite you later on. So it's still really important to get it right. So my name is Catherine Lees. I'm a security graduate at 7Shift in Cologne. Amongst other things, I've been involved in testing, compliance testing for the RED, both conceptual and functional. And 7Shift is also a member of the CRACoWi consortium. So I've been involved in creating talks and workshops, gaining and building knowledge around the CRA, and especially with a focus on helping SMEs. So the CRACoWi project is a consortium of several EU partners, and we're building a tool that combines two existing tools, one firmware-based and the one from our company, which is network analysis-based, to create a compliance wizard. So for small companies to have one place to go to do their self-assessment or to prepare for their important or critical level assessment. So the idea of this is to also make the technology available to a wider audience, make it a simplified portal that is more easy to use by somebody who isn't a security expert, and our communication, dissemination, and capacity building efforts tie into that as well. And the goal of this is to make CRA compliance feasibly achievable by small to medium enterprises. So 7Shift is Pablo's company. We are based in Cologne, a very small boutique security and IoT company. We test everything between hardware and the cloud. So that includes firmware, radio, hardware, cloud backends, mobile apps, websites. And over this huge variety of products, we see the same mistakes recurring over and over again. And I'm sure most testers will also be able to identify with most, if not all, of these pain points. So today I'm going to talk about a few things. This is not a CRA 101 webinar. There are plenty of other sources to get the basic information about where it is. For example, in the CRACademy, we have an extremely extensive 3-part series about the law itself. If you want to go and check that out, from Michelle Beiner. And there are plenty other things, but we're coming at this from a different angle today. We want to look at it from the point of a tester and how we can prevent problems, how we can make compliance easier by having these things in place. So I'm going to talk briefly about security by design, which is really the core element of the CRA. And then after that, I'm going to talk about some common anti-patterns for security and compliance. I'm going to look at some pain points specifically, and then I will introduce you to some tools designed specifically for the CRA that cover these pain points. And then I'm going to do a summary. So if you have questions during this talk, please write them in the chat. Pablo's got an eye on the chat, and we'll address all the questions at the end of this talk. So first, let's talk about security by design. So this is really the heartbeat of the CRA. It's about preparing at the start for what is coming, talking about the architecture before you actually build it, and seeing security as design decisions that are made early in the process. Because if you catch a design flaw early, then it's much cheaper than trying to fix it just before you launch. For example, no default password is a design decision, not a test that you run later on to make sure that you don't have a default password. And every design decision should also be documented. And a key also to security by design is doing this threat modeling, having a complete overview of the security posture of the device in the design phase. So security by design is best adopted at the very start of the process, but it can also work on devices that are already built. You can start with security by design at any stage. This is also really about processes, not just about paperwork. And one of the biggest challenges here is to make sure that everything's done upfront and not later. So this also would involve looking at your third-party components at a really early stage and making sure that you can not only get the components themselves, but also get access to the documentation that you're going to need later when you come to certify. So now we're going to cover some common anti-patterns for security and supply and compliance. So talking about things that I've seen that happen all the time. So this is a really typical thing, copy and paste compliance. You see an example, you use the example rather than applying it to your particular use case, right? So this first example is from the news, certificates shipped to production with their crypto copied straight from example documentation. And then we've also seen protocols and settings lifted from a template, including ones that the device never used, just because it was suggested that that might be a more secure option. So the boxes are all ticked, the paperwork looks complete, but on the inside, it's just a hollow shell. It looks done, but it isn't. So we're trying in this session to look to how to not be that product. One of the key things that we've found is that it's really important to get the conceptual side of things finished before you start the functional testing. And this can be applied to security and design as well, right? It's like a driver's license. You wouldn't set your practical test until you've done the theory. Another good example is you wouldn't build a house until you had your blueprints finished. So doing this thinking and this paperwork before you start with the hands-on things means that the hands-on stuff goes a lot more smoothly. The next point I want to talk about is the domino effect. A single point that's missed or overlooked can really compound the time later down the track. I've used here, for example, interfaces. We looked at the interfaces that the customer declared to us and evaluated all those conceptually without having the device. And then we come to the part of the conceptual thing where we have to look at the user manual. And in the user manual, it talks about a completely new interface, which wasn't mentioned before. So this means going back to the vendor, getting them to add this extra interface. It reopens every single test case that involves that. So it really has a knock-on effect. Small errors in the conceptual testing can really compound. So getting this conceptual watertight before you start makes a huge difference, because a missing detail doesn't stay small, it'll cascade over many things. And another one thing that I want to talk about is justifications. In compliance, you don't necessarily have to fulfill each test case. If you come up with a reasonable and technically sound justification. Now, what vendors tend to do is say, we accept the risk, and that's it. But this is just not sufficient. You need to show you're working, right? You need to say X is, well, on my slide, W is mitigated by X. The residual risk that's left over is accepted because of Y, and we prove this through evidence Z. So it's not okay just to say, we accept it, we accept the risk because it's low risk. You have to actually show you're working through that. So now I come to the pain points section. These are things that also occur regularly, and I've identified some CRA cluster tools that can solve these pain points. So the CRA cluster is a collection of EU finance projects that all have this goal of increasing knowledge, providing tools, for the CRA. So these tackle these specific pain points. They're all built in EU-funded projects, so they have to be very tightly aligned with the CRA itself. They track the regulation closely. It's not just a random vendor guessing what might be coming or a generic tool rebanded, especially for the CRA. These projects include open source, free, and commercial options. No single tool covers the full workflow yet, but this is not necessarily a disadvantage because unless things are very bad, probably companies have at least some of these processes already in place. So this would be my first advice, to take a look, an analysis of where you're at, get an overview, find out where the gaps are, figure out what tools you have that are already covering some of these requirements, and then you can look at what tools you might need to fill in the gaps. So you can mix and match for everything that you don't have covered so far. So pain point 1 is exactly about getting this overview, right? Where do I stand? How far away am I from being able to become compliant? And this starts off with the scope. Is our product even CRA relevant? So the CRACoWi project has a tool for this, which you can answer a bunch of questions and you can find out if your tool is in scope and which category it belongs to. Then once you're in scope, you can figure what requirements apply and where you should start. Now, even though the CRA has not been completely finalized, we know enough to start today. We know that it's going to be based on these processes. So there is a lot that SMEs can start preparing now. So we want to come out of this with like a clear prioritized to-do list, which is reflecting what processes or documentation we need to get in place. Here, the scope is also really important because there's the danger of either over-engineering or of under-compliance. And if you might be putting effort on the wrong things, discovering too late you're in scope. So it's really worth investing this time to figure out what your obligations are. So the traditional methods of getting this kind of overview would be to read the CRA, but it's a dense legal text. You could look at somebody else's evaluation for it. You could hire a consultant to apply it to your product. You could use educated guess. You could use some generic online checklists. But are you going to be sure at the end of that you've really covered everything, that you've got the full overview? It would make more sense to use like a CRA specific tool. So as I mentioned, first step is to check, are you in scope? You can use the CRACoWi free scope check. I'll provide a link to that later. You can find out in a few minutes that if the CRA applies to you. You don't need to register for it. You don't need to leave an email. You can just do that. It's all handled in the browser. So there is a more extensive tool. Once you've figured out you're in scope, you can use the cluster tool Octet to figure out where you stand. So here you do an assessment. You need to sign up for it, but this tool is actually available right now. You can get, again, by question-based, get an overview of where you stand. It can highlight the gaps and it can prioritize for you and tell you what you should be looking at next. So as I mentioned before, there's no reason to wait until the CRA is completely finalized. We're already fairly sure of a lot of it. So this is a tool that you can sign up for and use right now to get a complete overview of where your gaps are. So moving on to pain point 2, interface inventory. So what we get a lot is incomplete interface lists. What springs first to mind when you think about interfaces? Most vendors give all the visible ports or all the logical ports or just list the debug ports, but it's very rare that we get the complete overview on a first pass. For example, the vendor might list all open ports, but completely miss Wi-Fi and Bluetooth or the debug interfaces. So the true scope will surface later than it should, which requires extra testing, extra costs, and this domino effect, which I mentioned before. So what are the traditional methods, the existing methods for getting an interface inventory? The biggest problem here is that there is no single tool that can give you this overview. You have to use a bunch of different tools and then some data sheets, visual inspection. It's again this problem of how do I know when I'm finished, right? So here, even for different interface types, we have different tools. And then we have to stitch all of this output from all of these different tools together. So non-obvious interfaces will quite often get forgotten. So I think that the solution to this is to do risk assessment at the start before the product is designed, so you have a clear overview of all interfaces, including what the risks associated with them are, because you have then a part of the complete attack surface. So this product from another CRA cluster project, Cerium, is a risk assessment tool where you can do systematic threat modeling of all of the interfaces on the device. It's going to ask you all the right questions to get the complete picture of the device and eliminate this manual guesswork. So you'll come away from this tool having a complete interface list, which can support your documentation and your testing. So I'm going to move on to the next pain points, which is cryptography. So the biggest problem with cryptography is that the tools will give us raw data. This needs to then be organized and interpreted into something that is useful. We need to compare it to the standard that we're going to compare it against. Standards themselves keep moving, so we can't just have a spreadsheet that we use every time. We need to make sure that we've got the most up-to-date information as well. So there are other details to it, right? Different TLS versions have different recommended cipher suites, so it's not a straightforward process. And it's mistake prone and can lead to rounds of back and forth. So the traditional methods, OpenSSL just literally tells you what cipher suites and TLS versions you have with no kind of evaluation of that. Test SSL does give you an evaluation. It tells you if it's good or bad. Looking into that, this is checked against a SSL Labs standard, which is, I mean, it's a good standard, but it's not the BSI, so it's not useful here for compliance. So I can take the output of test SSL, but then I have to compare it to the BSI documentation, right, and check that manually. So this is not ideal, and for that, actually, 7Shift has we are developing the tool Bunkai, which is a online solution which allows for network analysis specific to IoT devices. We have an encryption check in this, which automatically checks TLS, cipher suites, and other aspects against BSI standards. It gives you a security analysis from every client hello profile. And not only that, it will tell you the specific reasons why you got the specific level. So there's transparent reasoning for every cipher suite rating. So it's not just the raw data, it's telling you what it is compared to the in the eyes of the BSI, and it's also telling us why we got that level. At the moment, the Bunkai cipher suite test shows you the ratings against the BSI and the IANA standard. So I'm going to talk about pain point 4, which is documentation, everybody's favorite subject. We're going to talk about version control because this can quickly become a big nightmare. If you don't have centralized version control, no one knows which version is correct. This also ties into where are you storing the documentation? Are you sharing it by email? How do the versions get increased and when do the versions get increased? Are these versions specifically tied into the build of the firmware that we are talking about? And does it have all the right docs? So what proof do we have that it matches the build? So if you are already using kind of an ISO style process with a change log, you're probably okay for this. But if not, you might want to kind of establish something now. So with the CRACoWi project, we plan to kind of make some templates that show the minimum information the document has into it to be complete. But yeah, this is something that is important to get right. So what will happen in a normal traditional situation? We might use a file server or SharePoint, neither of which insist on us using versioning. Documents might be exchanged with email. There might be several different updated versions flying around. Using manual versioning and using manual folder structures, which are not tied to the versions. So we might have different docs with the same version of them stored in different places, and trying to figure out which one is correct in hindsight can be a huge headache. So we have OSCRAT, which is another CRA cluster tool, which is a central repository with built-in versioning. So here you can put all of your CRA relevant documentation, and it's going to tell you what's missing as well. And it's going to tie every version to a build. So this is CRA designed with that in mind. So you can put your test results in there. You can add your threat modeling. And it's at the end, you have a single source of truth and a complete overview for that documentation. So the last pain point that I'm going to cover today is maintaining compliance. Once the product is released into the market, it's easy to put that paperwork in a drawer and forget about it. But the CRA has very specific requirements regarding end of life, regarding support periods, and specifically regular updates, vulnerability reporting. So all of this is quite a bit of work that continues afterwards. You have to have a way that people from outside can report vulnerabilities that they find to you. You have to have a policy saying, we're going to respond within this amount of time, and we're going to keep you updated on what's happening, and we're going to release a fix for it. We're going to update something. So this also needs to be in place. If this is not caught, then vulnerabilities can go uncaught and unfixed, and this can lead to some problems with the market or authorities who are going to have their eye on this. So the support period is a legal obligation, and companies should not only plan for it, but they also need to budget for it, right? So how might we do this? We could track vulnerabilities using emails and spreadsheets, and just hand the information over to our developers to fix. We could have reactive patching, which only kicks into place once we notice that something has broken. We might have vulnerability reports that are not associated with specific builds. And we might not have a policy in place for support period dates or end of support notices. So for this, we have a tool called CRAAI. So this is an AI-driven platform that looks at the complete life cycle. We're talking about monitoring. We're talking about vulnerability reporting and disclosure. So this has also got training in it to help you out of it. So this is, again, very close to an EU-built tracking the regulation, and it's turning this whole post-launch thing into a managed process so that the CE mark stays valid across the entire support period of the device. So that was our pain points. I'm just going to sum it up and give you a bit more information about the products that I've introduced to you today. So there is one silver lining. If you have your product RED compliant, then you're already on a really good way towards the CRA. It's already been officially confirmed that the RED will be superseded by the CRA at the end of next year. So if your device is RED compliant, at least those interfaces, those radio interfaces, will be compliant. You may need to do some compliance testing for the rest of the device, but you're extending it. You're not starting from zero. So I think we can all agree that the CRA puts into place that compliance is an ongoing activity. It's not a one-time gate. It's not a one-time goal that we need to achieve. That documentation is extremely important. The documentation needs to be consistent and needs to refer to specific builds. If we have the right tools in place, it can give us the peace of mind, and this can be survivable, right? And the best place to start would be find out if your device is compliant, find out what your gaps are. This would be what I'd recommend to any company who suspects that they might be in scope. So every gap that's left open, the longer it's left open, the more time it's going to take to fill. And then you can also figure out, oh, we already have that in place. We already have that in place. Maybe these gaps are not so large and intimidating as they might seem when you have no knowledge about it at all. So here is a QR code, which will take you to the link to Bunkai, which is the tool that I mentioned before regarding cryptography. So Bunkai is an online platform that allows you to test the security posture of a tool. You can use VLAN or LAN or also cellular to connect with it. And we are in the trial phase. So if you would like to test this tool out, please get in touch with us. So this is an overview of the CRA clusters partners that I've mentioned today. Everybody who has signed up, who has given permission to be contacted after this webinar, will receive an email with a handout with all of these links on it. So you don't need to screenshot this or save it now. You'll get all that information. If you didn't sign up for that, please write in the chat and we will take care of that. You can just, oh, you couldn't sign up without consent. Oh, okay, interesting. Okay, well, that solves one problem, but I'll figure that out for next time because it wasn't supposed to be like that. Good, but you will get all of this information and the links and everything. If you look at the CRA, the Cyberscan site, there is a list to all of the cluster projects. This list is growing. And there's a tool there for every pain point you saw today. Not all of the cluster partners deal with actual tools. Some of them are purely dissemination focused. And yeah, this cluster continues to grow. So as the contract came, everybody will be signed up to the mailing list. Well, there wasn't a choice, it was a choice with the registration. But yeah, here's a link just in case. And you'll also get the handout from the talk. So I appreciate everyone who came today, and we're going to open up the floor. If anyone has any questions, please write them in the chat. And yeah, I hope that it was a useful session for you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
So thank you everybody for joining. Oh, we have a last minute joiner. Okay, we have a question coming in. Why is AI not in the list of pain points and instead is part of the solutions? That's an interesting question. Well, in this case, yeah, AI is not one of the things that we've come across as a problem in the products that we've been assessing, right? So this talk was built on our experience with our customers. We are more focused more on, let's say, hardware and IoT devices, kind of more of the focus of the company, which is why our experience tend to levitate more to that type of products. And yeah, one of the solutions that we're presenting is one of our, let's say, EU partners or part of the EU grants, which is using AI as part of the analysis that what they're doing, right? But yeah, interesting question. But AI is present everywhere nowadays, right?
Yes, so I think AI has the potential to become a pain point, but it's not something that we identified for this specific talk. But it is a good point. Thank you. I see there's another question about can Bunkai choose which version of the BSI standard it's checking again? Maybe you can clarify what you mean by different versions, because there is one particular document that relates to cryptography and the cipher suites. So I'm not sure if you were referring to previous versions of that document or if you're referring to another BSI standard completely.
All right, I'm not seeing any new questions as of now. So I think we're going to thank everyone for your interest and for coming to the webinar. Like I said, the recordings will be available on the CRACoWi website as part of the CRACademy section. I think I've already posted the link in the Q&A section because we had a question about it, and hope to see you next time. We have another webinar that is in planning for after the summer break, which will be given by one of our partners of the consortium. Herminas was also be talking about, they're an SME, and they will be talking about their journey complying with the CRA. So lots of hands-on and pain points experimented from, let's say, the other side of the coin. So yeah, just keep your eye open, and if you're part of the mailing list, you will definitely receive heads up for that, to signing up for that webinar. Again, thank you everyone for joining, and see you next time. Bye.